Presiding Officer, and may I start by congratulating Michelle Ballantyne on her first speech today. I see she attracted a large and appreciative audience for it, at least on her own benches. I do well remember my own first speech here in June 2001. Like Michelle Ballantyne, I joined at a late period, not at the election, halfway through the mid-term. Can I wish her every success in her time here? Short of actual victory, that is. And I look forward to hearing a speech from her that I can agree with in full. I note she said, and I think I quote correctly, the only way to achieve change is through politics. I sincerely hope that's not true. And in particular, in the context of today's debate, I believe that it's also possible to achieve useful change through trade union activity. That's another very important way indeed. And although we're here today to discuss protecting workers' rights on a single day, it's something to which we should pay continuous attention. In particular, our colleagues on the Tory benches, I don't think we could reasonably describe as the natural friends of workers. The deletions today that we see the Tory amendment seeking to make to the motion perhaps illustrate that. They are unconcerned about the impact their particular plans of how we should leave the EU will impact on workers, as indeed more broadly. We clearly wish to see a continuation of the very substantial fees workers endure when they go to employment tribunals. That is something where those who have least are being asked to contribute most for their own justice. In general, they seek to defend their pernicious Trade Union Act of 2016. I find I can agree with Labour colleagues here, even during an election. I recognise that good sense has been articulated by an opponent today when they consider that the EU-derived workplace laws must be fully protected, and I absolutely support that. And when the Greens call for environmentally responsible business practices, again, not something the Tories sign up for, I cite as an example the cancellation of an important and would have been a major employer project such as the carbon capture project in Peterhead, again, I find common cause with colleagues beside me. So let's talk about trade unions. During my working life before Parliament, I was a member of the Banking, Insurance and Finance Union. I confess I was not an active member. I simply paid my sub as someone who wanted to know that the union was there should I ever need them, but I hoped that I never would. And when I became a manager, sitting the other side of the desk, opposite the union discussing activities in our company, I remained a member of the union. So let's have a look at the provisions of the Tory Act which attracts trade unions very specifically. Section 2 requires a 50% turnout of eligible voters for any ballot for industrial action. Now, if that were a principled position, it would apply, just for example, to local authority elections. And of course, it doesn't. It doesn't apply anywhere else, in fact. If it did apply to local authority elections, half of Tory councillors would not be in office. That's quite tempting, I must say, in its own way. But then there's Section 3, which also requires that 40% of the eligible voters have to vote to strike. And that is an extremely challenging position to be in, as those of us who campaigned in 1979 for the Scottish Assembly Act were aware of the George Cunningham Amendment, which made it 40% of the amendment. And again, if we apply that rule to local government, that would probably mean the Tories having no councillors at all. Now, that is extremely tempting indeed, I must say. But there is a matter of principle here. It seriously illustrates that the objective is to neuter trade unions, not to protect workers' rights. I mean, we'll look at further at some of the things that they brought. The check-off system, the loss of facility time. There is substantial evidence, of course, and we've had reference to it already, that trade unions are contributors to the success of businesses, companies and public services. Where there are unions as part of the decision-making, better decision-making results and success for the enterprise can follow from that. The RCN in particular cites research, goes back a while, but it's been endorsed subsequently, showing lower leaving rates in unionised businesses, lower use of employment tribunals, lower workplace injuries and less illness. That's a pretty good return for shared decision-making across all who work in an organisation through the involvement of trade unions. Now, I've been talking about last year's Trade Union Act. I'll simply close by saying that there's evidence here as well. The Emergency Workers Protection Act was introduced to create additional protections to some of the most important of our public services. There was a passionate and informed debate in this place. We on these benches supported this bill introduced by the Labour Lib Dem coalition when it came here. But when our Parliament voted on the general principles of the bill on the 30th of September 2004, I think 7 of us who are still in this Parliament were present. Only 1 of those voted against. Guess who? It was Murdo Fraser. Once again, depriving workers of proper rights. Then, as now, the leopard never changes its spots. The Tories will never work in the interests of workers.